All right, let's dive right in. We're tackling Jon Fosse today, and wow, you weren't kidding about that treasure trove of material. This Nobel Prize winner's life, his own words, the critiques, it's a lot to unpack.
A true Fosse feast, you might say. And talk about timely, everyone's buzzing about him with the prize and all.
Seriously. So, since most of us aren't exactly experts on Norwegian playwrights, let's start simple. Who is Jon Fosse?
In a nutshell, one of the most celebrated writers alive. But how he got there, that's a story and a half.
I bet. Speaking of stories, his bio mentions he struggled with writing in school, which for a Nobel Prize winner in literature is kind of wild, right?
Right. It's almost ironic when you think about it, but also makes his journey even more fascinating.
All right.
So we've got Fosse, born in 1959 in Norway, writing in Norsk, which is this less common form of the language already. He's coming from this unique place.
I love that. See, that's what grabs me. He's not just one thing, plays, novels, poetry, even children's books. What can't the man write?
It's like he's this master craftsman, picking the perfect tool, the perfect form for whatever he's trying to express. But you're right, it's his plays that have really put him on the map, internationally speaking.
Which, of course, we have to get into, because what makes them so special? But first, something I found interesting in the material you sent, this idea that his work isn't all doom and gloom. Even with the heavy themes, there's this, I don't know, a sense of hope. Almost playful sometimes.
It's true. You can get caught up in the big stuff, right? The death, the isolation, all those existential questions. And it's easy to think it's all bleak. But Fosse, he sneaks in this warmth, a humor that catches you off guard. There's a vulnerability there, almost a childlike honesty that really gets to you.
Okay, now that is interesting. Makes me think about something he said about his writing process, how it comes from this secret place inside him. Like, he's not trying to be all dark and difficult. It's coming from something deeper, more personal.
Exactly. I think it's that honesty, that rawness that really grabs people. Doesn't matter if you're a theater buff or just dipping your toes into Norwegian lit, that human element shines through.
So we've got this playwright who hates writing classes, finds his own language, draws from this secret place within, and now his work is performed all over the world, even though it tackles some pretty heavy stuff. What's the key? What makes Jon Fosse Jon Fosse?
But remember how he was deeply influenced by music? That might be a good place to start unpacking his unique style, what makes his play so captivating.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk music. I have a feeling this is more than just him playing in a band as a teenager.
You got it. It's way deeper than that. It's about the feeling music evokes.
Yeah.
The pauses, the rhythm, the way it can communicate emotions that words just can't.
Absolutely. And I bet this is where that whole silence and repetition thing comes into play in his writing, right? He's using them like a composer uses rests and motifs.
Now you're speaking my language. What's fascinating is Fosse himself has talked about trying to recreate those feelings he gets from music. But in his writing, it's not about literal melodies, but using language, the silences, the repeating phrases, to create an atmosphere, a specific mood.
So it's like he's composing an emotional soundscape, but with words on a page. Which reminds me, I was struck by all the pauses in the excerpts you sent. They felt intentional.
Right. And they're not just empty space. They're deliberate, full of unsaid meaning. It makes the audience lean in, really feel the weight of what's not being said.
Okay, I'm starting to get how powerful that could be, especially in a live performance. What about the repetition, though? I'll admit, that one threw me a little at first. I'll be honest, when I first started flipping through these plays, all the repetition, lines or phrases used again and again, it felt almost like, is this a typo? But now you're saying it's intentional, it's part of this feeling Fosse is going for.
Exactly. Think about it. When we're trying to express something really profound, something we feel deeply, don't we sometimes find ourselves, saying the same things over and over?
Oh, for sure. Like you're circling the feeling, trying to get a handle on it, but the words just, I don't know, they never feel big enough.
Right. And that's what Fosse is doing, but in a deliberate way, artistically.
Yeah.
With the repeating phrases, he's showing us the limitations of language, but also how vital it is when we try to articulate, the unsayable.
There it is again, the unsayable. That's how they described his work in the Nobel announcement, right? But what does that even mean? What makes something unsayable?
It's a great question. And to be honest, I think it's something you discover by experiencing Fosse's work more than by, defining it. But remember, the unsayable isn't about things we literally can't put into words. It's more nuanced.
Okay, so more like feelings or experiences that are so huge, so complex, that everyday language just falls short.
Exactly. Think about describing profound grief or the feeling of falling in love, totally consuming, overwhelming joy. How do you even start to put that into words?
You start grasping for metaphors, comparisons, anything to bridge that gap between what you feel and what you can actually say.
Exactly. We use comparisons, poetry, sometimes even silence, because words aren't enough, and that's where Foss comes in. He's giving us permission to just sit with those feelings, even if we can't perfectly articulate them.
It's like he's acknowledging that language has limits, but he's pushing those limits, stretching words to try and hold these big, messy emotions.
Yes, it's like he's saying, hey, it's okay to not have all the answers. There's beauty in the not knowing and the uncertainty of being human. And he does this by exploring some pretty universal themes: separation, death, love, just the anxiety of existing.
So basically, all the lighthearted stuff. But all jokes aside, you mentioned we'd be looking at some examples. How do these ideas, this idea of the unsayable, how do they actually show up in his work?
Well, one great example is an early piece called I Couldn't Say It to You. Powerful, short piece of prose, really gets at the heart of what Fosse's all about.
Even just the title, that feels very on brand for him.
Right. It's about this older man haunted by something he never said to his wife, even when she was dying. Simple premise, but man, does it ever speak volumes about the weight of words unspoken, those things we carry, said and unsaid.
And how those things we don't say can become so huge in our minds, these big unspoken regrets.
Yes. And this idea of things unspoken, things bubbling beneath the surface, it becomes even more powerful in the plays.
Because now you've got the silence on stage, which, let's be real, can be way more intense than any dialogue.
Oh, absolutely. Take a play like Someone Is Going to Come, for example. Two characters paralyzed by fear, and it's all communicated through these long silences, those repeating phrases. You can just feel the tension. It forces you to confront what's not being said, which is really effective.
I bet you're not just watching the story, you're right there in it, experiencing those feelings alongside the characters. It's like you're feeling their anxiety and uncertainty.
Exactly. It's visceral. And Fosse uses that discomfort, that tension, to pull us deeper into their inner lives. We're not just watching, we're feeling their anxieties, their uncertainties, those unspoken desires.
So it's less about what is being said and more about those spaces between the words, the things left unsaid.
Exactly. And the way he writes just adds to it. Fosse, he's known for minimalist language, short sentences, almost childlike in their simplicity, but then combined with the silences, the repetition, it creates this powerful effect.
So he's stripping language down to the basics, making you pay attention to the emotion behind every word.
Precisely.
Okay.
And because it is so stark, so stripped down, it can go beyond cultures and languages. Meaning, you don't have to be a scholar of Norwegian lit to feel the raw emotion in his plays. I think that simplicity makes it even more universal. You've got plays like Dream of Autumn, Death Variations, even the titles, they just hit on these things we all deal with.
It strikes me those themes, dreams, death, even just the changing seasons, they all deal with time, with memory. Is that something he explores in the plays too? Time, memory, dreams. It's like he's going right for the core of what it means to be human, those things we all share, even when we experience them so differently.
Exactly. You said it perfectly. And Fosse's plays, they often jump around in time, past and present, blurring the lines between reality and these almost dreamlike sequences. It's kind of unnerving, but also weirdly familiar.
It's how our memories work, right? It's not like we experience life in a perfectly linear narrative. It's all these jumbled up pieces in our heads, snippets of conversations, feelings that stick with us way longer than the actual event.
Precisely. And that's what Fosse gets so right, that fragmented, almost chaotic feeling of memory, of our own consciousness. He doesn't shy away from it, the messiness of it all. And that's part of why it's so engaging, so captivating. He's not handing us answers on a silver platter or trying to tie everything up neatly. He's just showing us life in all its messy complexity.
Which honestly is kind of refreshing. I mean, so much of what we consume, especially entertainment, it's all about those neatly wrapped up stories, beginning, middle, end. But Fosse's doing something different.
He really is. And I think that's a big part of why his work is resonating with so many people, especially now. It's like we're living in this time where everything feels uncertain, chaotic even, right? And Fosse's plays, they tap into that, but they also offer this strange comfort. Like he's saying, hey, it's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to sit with the unknown.
That is a powerful message, I'll give you that. But I gotta be honest. As someone who's totally new to his work, it does sound kind of intimidating. Experimental theater, minimalism, giving voice to the unsayable. Where do you even start with Fosse? Is there like one play or novel that would be a good entry point?
That's a tough one because it really depends on the person. But if you're looking for something that might feel a little more approachable, I always recommend his novel Morning and Evening.
What makes that one a good place to start?
Well, it's pretty short, for one thing, which can feel less daunting. And it's considered one of his more hopeful works, even though it deals with death.
There's that word again, hope. Not exactly the first thing that pops into my head when I think existential plays about death and isolation.
Right. But there's this quiet beauty to Morning and Evening, this deep sense of peace that just stays with you. It makes you think about life and death, for sure, but also about those tiny moments of connection, those things that make us human.
Sounds like the perfect counterpoint to our crazy, gotta go fast world. A little reminder to slow down, appreciate the little things, find the beauty in the everyday.
Exactly. And that, I think, is why Fosse's work is hitting home for so many people right now. He's not giving us easy answers. He's not trying to make things neat and tidy. He's embracing the mess, the unknown, the unsayable parts of life. And by doing that, he's reminding us it's okay to just sit with those feelings, those big questions, and find the beauty in what we don't know.
He's giving us permission to not have it all figured out, which, let's be real, is pretty freeing.
It really is. And in a world that's obsessed with certainty, with instant gratification, well, that's kind of a radical idea, isn't it?
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Jon Fosse, I've got one last question, and it's really for our listener to ponder. The Nobel Prize Committee, they called Fosse a master of ambivalence and the unresolved. In a world that's always demanding certainty, what can we learn from art that embraces the opposite?
What a fantastic question to leave our listeners with. And I really encourage you to think about that as you explore Fosse's work. He won't give you easy answers, but maybe that's the point. Maybe the real journey is in sitting with the questions, embracing the unknown, the uncertainty of it all. Who knows, you might just find something profound in those silences, in the spaces between the words.
We hope you'll seek out his work, give it a read, and see what you discover. You might be surprised at what you find.